Good morning. What a great group we have here this morning. So good to connect to so many people that we haven't seen for such a long time. And so many kids, which is fantastic. Welcome to all those who are connecting from the online world, Cranbourne and East Paran and everywhere else. So welcome to you guys and a big hi to that online world. Those who are dressed up on Sabbath in front of their screens in their Sabbath best, and those who are in their pyjamas watching this service. I am jealous, no doubt. This morning I'd like to share with you something a journey that we've been on. There's a handful of us, maybe several of us have been on this journey. Oh, hello. Oh, we have a future preacher here. Keep an eye on him. I want to share with you a big picture view of something that we've been working on over the last 4 or 5 years. And this is several of us that have been working on this. So we're not going to go into a lot of detail, but I promise you over the next several months, there's going to be those from our team who will share more detail of what we've learned. So today, think of today as more of a general overview or a report of some things that we have discovered. The title of the sermon, he's looking at me on the screen and he's pointing at me. He's a cutie. The title on the sermon is Where to Now? What do we do now in this post-COVID world as we are slowly coming out of it? What is the things that we can probably do coming out of it? What are the changes that we can make? And one thing I want to do, I want to ask you guys a question. I'm going to grab this mic, if that's okay. Over the last couple of years, if I was to ask you what you have learned in the realm of relationships, church, what have you learned last couple of years? Can I just quickly ask, what have you learned when it comes to relationships? Isolation. Yeah? What did isolation do to us and our relationships? Yeah. Isolation, yeah. Harmful, isolated from family, and it does something to us. You felt lonely. And so one of the things that we have learned is how important family is, relationships are, community is, church. And it's not going to be automatic for us to come back and reconnect. I was speaking to someone this morning, and they said, coming together and even just calling someone on the phone is not the same as it was 2 years ago, because people just don't want to pick up. Text me maybe, send me an SMS. But more and more people are finding it really hard to connect. Are you finding that as well? Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of nods. It's something that we have to relearn once again. So I'm going to put this back down. I'm having trouble with it. I asked this same question to people at work, and they said what they were missing was the humanity, the human connections, just being human again. And they're really looking forward to it. And these aren't Christian. These are people who are craving connections. Some have coped well and some haven't. Some communities have coped well, some communities have struggled. Some churches have coped well, most churches have struggled. Some marriages have coped well, some marriages have struggled. The one thing that I've learned is that through this pandemic, basically where we have been has been accelerated greatly. So for instance, people are saying that our church was heading in a particular direction that maybe in 5 to 10 years, that's where we would be. Well, that's been accelerated. We are now there today. It's only taken 2 or 3 years to get there, whereas normally it would have taken 5 to 10. If a marriage was struggling and the chances were that they were probably on the way to maybe separation or divorce in maybe 5 or 10 years, it happened during COVID. And on the opposite side, where things were going well, COVID brought people together and created more cohesion in other areas, including churches and communities. So it seems that and it's psychological, I think it makes sense, that struggles and hardships and difficulties can accelerate where you are heading. And it makes sense. I think that makes sense. The other thing that we have noticed is that there's been a huge shift in the awareness of society, and that's putting another pressure on us. Some of the things, I'm going to mention just a few things here. More and more people are realizing that their news is questionable. I remember when Trump ran, he made the fake news moniker very popular. And already, you could question a lot of our sources from back then. But today, more and more people are questioning what they're seeing online, what they're seeing from their news outlets, including the ones that you support. We are realizing even the news outlets that we support are not as honest maybe as what we thought 2 or 3 years ago. So there's this awareness that's slowly coming to terms with that. Another awareness is that the financial system is changing. And I'm involved in this personally. In the past, you wanted a loan, you wanted to invest your money, you'd go to your bank manager, you'd go to certain financial institutions. Today, all this can be done online with crypto. And that's something that I actually enjoy doing. And in the future, I don't know how long, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, there will be no need, possibly, for banks, possibly going to a bank manager. You just open your app, you take your loan, you're done. You want to invest your money, you open your app, and all this is done in the world, automatically, straight away. That's the kind of world that we're coming to, and people are being aware that there are these changes happening, and it can be stressful. The other thing that we've been aware, especially in the last 2 years of the pandemic, is that official data that we hear, that we read, that we see, is questionable, especially if it's politicized. You'll find that one political party says, it's a disaster, it's terrible. Another political party says, there's nothing to see here. It's the same old thing. I remember reading this in a newspaper several years ago. I was reading The Age and I was reading the Herald Sun. And I remember reading about the global warming. And they were talking about a report, I think from the ICCC. And the report said, in one newspaper, they reported on the data, it was based on data. One newspaper said, it's a disaster. We're all going to be underwater in 100 years. Okay, you've heard this before. The other newspaper, because they're a different political leaning, said, it's fine, no problems, don't worry about it, it's all good. Same data, same report, 2 different stories. And we are becoming more and more aware that our news agencies and those who deliver the information to us have these biases, and it's difficult to know who you trust. And this is the world that we're slowly moving into. Another thing that we are aware is that what it meant to be free before the pandemic is different what it means to be free today. The idea of freedom has changed. And a lot of people are struggling with the idea of that. And there's many things that I could mention here. His last one here I'll mention is, and I don't know how much you guys follow politics. I actually enjoy it, especially American politics. I find it quite entertaining, as I'm sure some of you do too. And what I've noticed is that politicians have no problems with lying directly to the public, even though they're being fact-checked in real time, right then, there and then, and they just continue to lie. And it's just fascinating. And it happens on both sides. All right? I know that's going to upset everybody because you all have your favourite political party, but everybody does it in one way or another. So it's a changing world, and what we are seeing is a society that's becoming more and more aware of these things, a society that's becoming more and more sceptical, a society that is not built on trust as much as it used to. How does that relate to Christianity? We're also seeing a change in our Christian communities and how we are being perceived. For the first time, Christianity is being rejected by the world. Just in general. We're seeing this in TV programs, we're seeing this on TV shows, and we see it in subtle ways where maybe the pastor, the priest, a person who is religious, they are being made fun of and they are belittled. And we see this more and more. It's quite obvious. It's interesting if you look at the statistics. In 1901, when they did the census, do you know how many Christians there were in Australia? Take a guess. 1901, 120 years ago. 96. Wow, Vadim, Pastor Vadim, you're by 1% off. That was fantastic. Okay, let me try this one. In 2016, how many people identified as Christians in 2016? Pastor Vadim, you cannot answer. Not yet. Any idea? Oh my goodness, 52%. You were off by 2%. That is amazing. So we've got some geniuses here this morning. That's a 50% drop in just 100 years. So can you see how the world is changing so rapidly, so fast, in so many ways? And it's putting pressure on us as church communities. Since 1965, we've seen 38 million Adventists baptised. 38 million Adventists, or Christians being baptised into the Adventist faith. 38 million since 1965. But since then, we've lost 40% of those. 15 million. So we're getting good baptisms, but 40% left the church of those who were baptised. That's a lot. That's a lot. And of those, more than half, 60%, were our young people. The pressure on our churches, the pressure on our communities, on our church communities, the pressure on our young people is huge, especially once they get to the age when they have freedom, they go out to university, they get a job. The pressures are quite great. So we are watching a culture change right in front of our eyes, and it's happening rapidly, very, very fast. How do we as a church adjust to that? And that's something I want to briefly talk to you this morning. I'm going to try that mic again, Graham. Hold it like this. Like this. All right, I'll try that. I've got instructions to hold it like this. I'm going to share with you a personal story, something about myself and something I don't share often. And most of you... No good? Which one? Red one? Let's try this one. You know, we all feel weird when we're young. We all feel like we're strange, especially when we're with our youth group. Everyone feels a little bit different. And I always felt a little bit different. Yeah, this one works fine, Graham. Thank you. I realised that the way I think, the way I process ideas was different to most people. And I had an aha moment when I went to a conference in Sydney in my mid-20s, early to mid-20s. And I was sort of involved in church leadership already at that time. I was involved in, I think, Pathfinders. I was a young elder and being involved with the youth. And I wanted to up my skills, because I felt I lacked a lot of things back then, as we all do when we're growing up. And so I went to this conference, and it was a 3-day conference that was organised by the Sydney, one of the Sydney major conferences there, and they invited young leaders and young pastors from all over Australia. They flew up, they drove down, and it was 3 days of workshops. It's fantastic, actually. It was really, really good. The last workshop we did was really interesting. There was about, let's say, about 80, 90 people in an auditorium. And the presenter said, right, we're going to get everyone to do a quick questionnaire. So the questionnaire was done, took maybe 15, 20 minutes, maybe half an hour. And at the end of the questionnaire, there was a result. And the result would add up, as you do, those like personality tests, I'm sure you've done those. And the result would add up, and the number would identify you to an animal. So someone might be a fox, someone might be an owl, someone might be I was going to say cow, that's probably not a good not a good one. Say a wolf, right? So everyone would be something different. And then the presenter would say, right, everyone who's a fox, go to that side of the room, and if you're this, go there. So we all split up into 4 corners of the room. And I noticed that there was a group of, say, 25 plus people. There was a group of 30 odd people. There was another group of maybe over 30 people. And then there was a group here, which I was in. There was 3 of us. Now, already, as a young man, my self-esteem was already struggling. I'm already struggling with, am I of personal value? Am I worth something? And already here I am with 3 people thinking, I knew it. I'm the dummy in the class again. Here I am. And I thought, maybe I've made a mistake. So I checked again my scores, and the presenter comes around and he says, nope, that's about right. Fantastic. And then we played a game. And I can't remember the details of the game, but it had to do with pen or pencil and paper, and the group was involved and they had to come up with an answer, whatever it was. And so the presenter said, right, everyone go. And the 3 of us were ready to go, and we put pencil to paper and just about to write what we thought it was. We didn't even make contact. The pencil didn't even make contact with paper, and a group already cheered, and they already got the answer. Round 2. I said to the 3 guys, I said, look, come on, we can do this. We're not that dumb as what we feel. We are intelligent. I'm pretty sure we can get this right, the 3 of us. Round 2. And the presenter said, go. And somebody else was now, out of the 3 of us, we took turns, and the pencil almost touched the paper, and another group, yay, and they got it. We couldn't even start writing before a group already won or already got the result. And this went on for 2 or 3 or 4 rounds. Anyway, each answer to this thing, he would write on the board. It was a word. And he would write one word, then he would write another word. And I looked up at the board and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. Those words mean something. Or at least I thought so. There was a pattern to it. But I didn't take any notice. I thought it was just coincidence. And then we did the round again. And of course we lost. Typical, right? Another group won. They were all excited. And then the presenter said, right, all these words up on the blackboard, what do they mean? Well, the 3 of us looked at each other, and we had already figured it out, a word before. And we thought, oh, it's this. And he said, don't yell it out. Put your hand up if you know what it is, and I'll come and check. So we all put our hand up almost instantly. He came over, we whispered, he goes, yep, that's right, fantastic. Let's see how long it takes them to figure it out. And 15 seconds goes past, 30 seconds goes past, a minute goes past, or it felt like a minute. And the 3 of us are looking at each other thinking, what are they, stupid? We couldn't believe it, that something so simple that they couldn't figure it out. And eventually, one group, a little bit brave, they gingerly put their hand up and they said, is it this? He goes, yes, that's what it is. And then everyone looked at us because they realized we got it like a minute earlier, thinking, wow, who are these guys? That was an experience that taught me that everyone is wired differently. Everyone is special and gifted and unique. And sometimes it takes an experience like this to show that uniqueness in that person's way of thinking. And the idea was behind the exercise was that, say, a church board or a business or a community needs a variety of people. You need 2 or 3 of those people, 2 or 3 of these, 2 or 3 of these, but only 1 of me. You don't want too many of me. And that was one of the biggest lessons that I learnt there. What I discovered through that, going forward, is that I actually had a unique way of thinking. And they call it Asperger's. Have you heard of this? All right, and some of you may know people who have Asperger's. And Asperger's, people have, or I call them Aspies for short, people who are Aspies have they can be incredibly gifted and focused and strong and unique in their way of thinking. They will see things that other people just cannot make sense of. You've probably met people like this. Maybe you have people in your family like this. But in other areas, Aspies are really weak and they struggle. One of the things they struggle with is social interactions, social cues. You know, they might laugh when it's inappropriate. They might be loud when they need to be quiet. They might say things that they shouldn't say at a funeral, you know, or at a wedding. You know, my goodness, look at that bride. She looks, you know, and it's usually not a positive thing that they say. So I had to learn about social cues because I struggled in that area. I didn't come naturally to me. And it's funny that I married someone who is absolutely fantastic in social cues. Janine is just amazing in that area. And so she's been teaching me on this journey on what is appropriate and what is inappropriate in a social environment. Okay, and some of you know me, so you know me very well, that I sometimes do or might say something that might not be appropriate. But now you know, and you will forgive me. Fair enough? That's the mind of an Aspie. Got me thinking, is that the church is very similar in that way. The church is incredibly gifted in amazing ways. Can you tell me just quickly some of the things that we as a church have, some of the gifts that we have that are a blessing to the community? Just throw out a few words. Yes? Absolutely. We have a great pastor. What about general as the Adventist? Yes? Danny, can you tell us what is that purpose? Three Angels Message, yeah. Kind and caring people. We have a lovely community here. What about as the Adventist, the whole overarching Adventist philosophy? What have we got to offer to the world? Some of the things that we have, some of the things we do. Health message. How long have we been promoting a health message to the world? Longer than it was ever popular. Prophecy. We have a beautiful gift in prophecy. Our education system. We have incredible schools all over the world. The second largest private education system in the world. Only second to the Catholic Church. Pathfinders. Pathfinders is an amazing blessing to a community. As someone who was in Pathfinders and who was a Pathfinder director for many, many years, I grew. Graham and I, both directors, both worked together for many years. A real blessing. It changed us. It helped us grow. Our humanitarian work, ADRA. Another incredible blessing. Thank you, Pastor. Multinational church. I like that. The other thing is what we have, and I learned this a couple of years ago, is that politically we are evenly spread. And we share this with the Catholic Church, which is really interesting. Both the Catholic Church and the Adventist Church are very politically evenly spread, which means there's, you know, some churches are very left-leaning and the bulk of the population or the community is left. Others are very right-leaning. But the Adventists are very evenly spread. That's why when I have Sabbath lunches with my family, we argue a lot, especially about politics, politics and church. And who would have thought that the humanitarian work that we have done as a church here at Lakeside would now be feeding up to 500 families per week? The team who is doing this, Bobo, who is running it, from the learning centre in Pakenham, that's why we had to move. We just couldn't facilitate that kind of demand and that kind of work in the community. At the moment, it's up to 500. Today, we're doing an ADRA collection down at Berwick, at the intersection there, and if you want to drive through and give a donation, this is a bit of a plug, go ahead. Or the little tap and go behind the centre there. Tap about 20 times, all right? So who would have thought that we would grow our ADRA program so rapidly and in such a big way? And also, if you're down at Berwick and you want to meet some politicians, I was told that some of our, like Brad Batten and others, will be visiting us. Brad Batten, our local leader here in this Cardinia area, he'll be supporting us. And he's been supporting ADRA in many different ways. So we're getting a lot of support in many different areas. However, we as a church also have our weaknesses. And I want to share with you a couple of things. Because of time, I'm just going to read these out, some of the things that I've come up with. This is what people say. All right, so this may not all be true, but this is what people sometimes say. Our churches don't seem to care for the communities we live in. Depends on the church. We are labelled as anti-women, anti-gay, anti-other religions. We are anti-this, anti-that. We are intolerant of this, we are intolerant of that. We are judgmental, we lack mercy. We don't care for the marginalised, the poor, the drug addicts, and so on. The idea that we are better than them is an impression that they have of us. And I think some of those are absolutely true. Some of them are not. But the idea to be relevant in a changing world and to be able to be useful is to acknowledge the two things that I acknowledged as an Aspie. That I had a gift and that I could tune that gift and improve on that gift, but I had challenges and I needed to develop those challenges. My challenge was the social interacting, the social cues. And I think the church does struggle with that as well in some ways. Understanding who our true character is, our strengths and our weaknesses. So, what this did, it brought this attention. I spoke to several people of the church, some good folk here, and we decided to start a church advisory group. And that's what we did. We went to the board, and it's about 4 years ago, and I said to the church board, hey, listen, we want to start a church advisory group. We want to look into what makes churches grow. How does a church become relevant and successful in this changing, rapidly changing world? The board gave us the blessing and we moved forward. And we had several people over the years. Some of those people have changed. But I want to share with you just very, very briefly some of the things that we have learned. Both internally, what we can do as a church internally, and what we can do externally. Before I mention that, what I've been doing, and many of you have not seen me for a long time, is I have been visiting other churches. I was looking at my stats just recently in preparation for this, and I realized that the year before COVID, the 12 months, I had visited about 40 places of worship where I was meeting and speaking at these different communities. And that's, for me, just a desire to understand. So some of us have put a lot of research into this, read books, went to conferences by the union or by the general conference. Danny and I went to Brisbane for a conference that was organised by I think it was the Queensland conference at the time. And that was fantastic. That was there for about 4 days, I think we were there. And we were sponsored by the union and the conference. I think ADRA also sponsored us. So this journey that we've been on has been a long one, for about 4 years. The one thing that we've learned that I can, and you probably already know this, is that one of the institutes that were involved in this was called the Fuller Institute. It's a research centre. They studied churches across America, about 500 or so churches from memory, or something like that. It was a fairly large number. And the scope of the project was, why do churches fail? But when they started studying all these churches, and there was about 15 professors involved with PhDs in this study, what they discovered was why churches succeed. And that's why I think this is really important and relevant. And what they discovered is that our churches are calibrated for a world that doesn't exist.
that the way we think as a church, the way we are calibrated, because of the world is so changing so rapidly, that we're struggling to connect with the world. The first thing that we learned, and I'm just going to focus on this very briefly, is that when a church focuses on its young people, young families, young children, our youth, our teens, when the church body, those of us who have grey hairs or no hairs, focus on our young people, that by focusing on our young people, everyone is lifted and everyone benefits. And again, I won't go into detail, but I'll tell you a story. When I was in a church in my early 20s, like I think I mentioned briefly, I was a Pathfinder leader there with Graham. The amount of support that we got from the church was absolutely amazing. And at one point, I think we had 40 children. We had about 12, 15 staff, but we had the body of the church supporting us in all different ways. Guess what it did to the church? This young group of people, young people in their early 20s, running a Pathfinder club, it lifted the whole church up. The church changed. Jade, do you remember that? Yeah. Graham, you remember that? The whole church changed. Do you know how many church plants we had at one church? Take a guess. In about a period of 10 years, I think, or 12 years. Take a guess. 1? 2? No, not 5. 3 church plants. Because the church worked in a successful, harmonious way. And we had something like 28 nationalities in that church. It was a multicultural church. But the church focused on its young and really encouraged them. What we discovered is that when we read the Bible, that the Bible was written with the concept of restoring relationships. That the authors were more concerned with connecting people together, with restoring relationships, especially one in particular. And that's what we started focusing on as our group, restoring relationships, old, medium, and young, working together towards a common project. And it seems that the research shows that, I know it sounds like a broken record, but relationships seems to be the key. And supporting our young people, our young families, our teens, our youth, seems to be a key to church growth. The second thing that we learned is that a church to grow not only has to focus on its young and connect with them and encourage them and have a heart for them, but have that same connection and regard and heart for the community. This was also part of the research that what we've discovered. Sahalin, what's his name here? Monty Salin, who was the Director of Research and Special Projects for the SDA Ohio Conference, he said this. He spent over a decade looking at this question. He studied all the churches in the northeastern part of the United States, 647 churches he studied. And this is what he concluded. He said there is no correlation. Now this is talking about church growth, okay? He said there is no correlation between the number of Bible seminars and soul winning. This does not mean public evangelism is necessarily ineffective, but it makes no difference to whether churches grow or don't grow. It's not a significant factor. Now, that doesn't mean public evangelism doesn't work. Pastor Vadim had recently, if you don't mind, I'd like to share that just quickly. He was on radio or on a YouTube channel just recently. Incredible success, over 100,000 views. And maybe, have you shared this with the church yet? No. So I won't mention it then. Incredible success. And I think there is an incredible place for public evangelism. I would love to see our church, led by Pastor Vadim, here, where we are at Lakeside in Cardinia, for all of Victoria, he could have a regular online presence every day, Pastor Vadim. 10 minutes online, YouTube channel, answer questions, maybe a great presentation, something that we can have and then spread it, share it, click it on an online world. Why? Because that's what people are doing today. Those who are watching today, I know once they've finished this, their YouTube channel is going to be populated with their favourite things that they're going to watch even later on. So people are doing this. But I think we need to have something that's relevant to our community here. It can work. He says people are looking for a place that will enable and encourage meaningful service in the community, a way to live out their faith so they can express it. He said, in contrast, he says, Sarlin's research has found that the strongest correlation with church growth was engaging with the community in active service. But sadly, he says, very few Adventist churches are involved in these types of programs that have the strongest correlation with church growth. People are looking for a place to connect, to share. They're looking for meaningful relationships. That's what they're looking for. And post-COVID, guess what people are looking for? Meaningful relationships. They want to connect. We want to feel human again. Because of time, I'm going to skip a few things. I'm going to ask Sam. Sam, come forward. Sam's he's been on our committee right from the beginning. Hello, Sam. How are you going? Maybe grab this one because that one's working a little bit better. Sam, we've had a small team. We've been working on this church growth advisory and we've been learning things. What have you learned and what have you done to apply it in your life, the way you function?
It's a real challenge to summarize, I think, 4 years of reading and discussions in a minute or two. But I think for me, one of the big take-homes from the reflections of the last couple of years is the value that not only doing things as a family, but if I can kind of even use the phrase of in the spirit of a family makes a significant difference to spiritual growth and I think also church life. And by that I mean that when you look at so many of the Bible stories, parables of Jesus, you always hear of men, women, children. You hear of people doing things like the pilgrimages to Jerusalem as families, and they grew spiritually as families in so many ways. And I guess I don't mean that in terms of only people with children. I mean that in terms of the age groups, the type of people there. They included everyone in what they were doing, and I think that's exactly the kind of context where especially young people grow and we all learn from each other. And one little example where I know I've made a particular effort over the last couple of years has been once a month we are involved in a soup kitchen. So Becky, my fiance, and I, her family, we've got a great team of a couple more senior leaders, and we're there once a month for a few hours providing food for those who are materially less well off. And while there's a great blessing in what we're doing for those who are needy, you'll hear it from every volunteer that I think the greatest benefits we see are often for ourselves. And it's been an incredible journey over the last couple of years seeing how that's evolved. We've had people who have been volunteers suffering with cancer, and we do the whole journey together. We've had a young woman not too long ago started studying up at Avondale, and as a volunteer family, we prayed for her and basically have been touching base with her since she's moved interstate to study. And every time she's down and she's free on a Saturday afternoon when we're doing it, she'll join us, and we enjoy getting to see what the updates are in her life, despite her being so far away. And even on an outreach front, it's been one of the few places that it's been really natural and easy for us to invite people from work or old friends from school to connect in and say, hey, come along, we're feeding some people today. And it's a place where those prayers that can be a bit awkward for someone who's never been in that environment before. It's kind of an okay part of the thing because they know they're in a down-to-earth group of people who are genuine care and take an interest in them. So not only has it been a great blessing for us as individuals to mingle and connect with people who are struggling, but also a great learning experience, I think, for myself to nurture young people. We've had friends bring their kids along because they love what we're doing, who've never been in church before. And also one of the windows of opportunity where it seems so natural to bring people into an environment where God's at the center.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate that. And I would say, Sam, that, and I speak for all the team, those of us who have learnt these principles, who connect with young people or who connect with those in the community, those who are less privileged, those who are struggling, that it is us that have changed the most. We have gone through the largest change. Yes, we've helped them with some food, with some clothing, show affection and love. But ultimately, the people who walk away with the greatest change is us. And I remember Peter. You remember the story of Peter in chapter 10 of Acts when he got that vision of that big meat lover's pizza from the sky. And God says, eat. And Peter says, I've never had meat lover's pizza. There's no way I'm going to eat that. That's unclean. But God says, no, eat. What I have made clean is not unclean. And Peter had to change the way he thought. And that journey took him to Cornelius' house, a Gentile Roman centurion. And while there, in this uncomfortable, in this strange place, this unclean home, surrounded by unclean people, by this Roman, the enemy of Israel, the enemy of the Jews, okay, he starts giving a Bible study. The first in 28 fundamentals. He was doing fundamental number 1. And halfway through the Bible study, you know what happened? He didn't even finish the Bible study. If you read it in chapter 11, or last part of chapter 10, the Holy Spirit came down. He didn't even finish the Bible study, and the Holy Spirit came down on the whole family. And Peter must have thought, oh my goodness, what has happened here? That's why he struggled with it so much. Who do you think came away from that experience with a more changed heart, with a changed attitude? Who do you think came away from that more different? I would say it was Peter. And when Peter went back to Jerusalem and reported what had happened, they scratched their heads. James, what happened? What were you doing? What were you thinking? And Peter said, this is what happened. Holy Spirit came down on the Gentiles. And they looked at each other and they thought, okay, looks like the gospel's going to the Gentiles. And it changed the church. The church opened its doors to everyone. It changed the church. It changed Sam. It's changed me. It's changed Ricardo, Danny, all of us who've been on this team have been working through it. I'm conscious of the time, so I'm just going to go to this last part. Actually, what I might do is maybe fast forward and Graham, can you just show that video quickly? It's a 2-minute video we did just recently, and I think it was shown at the session a couple of weeks back or last week, and just put that up now. It only goes for 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Dhruvi and I'm part of the ADRA team, and how I got to know ADRA was through my mum. For a while we were struggling for a bit because we just moved to Australia and we didn't really have anything or anyone, and we got to know the team through Numa, and who helped us through for a while, and things got better for us, and I started coming here to volunteer and became part of the church member, and now I got baptized about a month ago and officially part of the community, and yeah, it's been really fun being around and helping people throughout the COVID.
How to reach the community for Christ has been a real challenge. It used to be fairly easy with door knocking and gift Bible cards, but those sorts of outreaches have been more and more difficult. But now, the free food corner, people are very sensitised to the need to help one another, and people come along for help. They appreciate that, and very often they then become our volunteers. As volunteers, we become close friends with them and invite them to church. Some come to church and some get baptised. It's fantastic, it's simple, it's easy, it's Christ-centred, and it's great.
When I was there filming that, I met that team for the first time and that lady who was baptised. Beautiful, beautiful, wonderful people. What we have learned, and when I spoke to Pastor Dennis Hankinson, is that we have realised that the culture has changed. That in the past, when I grew up, and in certain parts of the world, that people came to faith through a Bible study, through a seminar, through a church program, through something like that, something to do with the Word. They would believe. Then they would come into church, and they would then change the behaviour. They would give up smoking or, the behaviour that wasn't consistent with the community. They would change the behaviour. And then later on, they would then belong to the community. They would be part of that community. They would be embraced by that community. Today, in the Western world, in Australia, in America, in Europe, that has been reversed. It's not true in maybe Asia, it's not true in Africa or Latin America or Eastern Europe, but in the developed world, that direction is now different. People want to belong to something. They want to be a part of something. They want to be a part of something that shares their values. Helping the community, supporting people, loving, caring. And when they come to our churches, like that lady that you saw there, that's how they start today. Then they have the change of behaviour. And then over time, they learn, and then they believe the things that we believe. And so what we are seeing is this shift in thinking and this shift in how people are coming into our communities. And that's something I think we need to be aware of. When I think of the pioneers, I'm just going to finish with this as I'm trying to summarise as quickly as I can. The pioneers, Ellen White and so on, I remember reading about this, that she would get in her horse and buggy, she would travel an hour out of town to the other side of town where there was these rat bags of people and there was crime and, there was poverty, and she would hand out food and she would help them out. Then she would ride back another hour in her horse and buggy, and she would do this every now and then. Do you know what that town was called that she travelled to? It's called Battle Creek. Today, Battle Creek is known as an Adventist community, or mostly an Adventist community. But when she started on that journey, that wasn't the case. The church in Rome, the Christian church in Rome, during a pandemic, would take the people who were thrown out onto the streets, the pagans, as soon as the boils or whatever it was would show up bodies, the pagan neighbours would put their bodies on the streets or on the sidewalk, wherever it was. The Christian families would scoop them up, take them into their homes at their own personal risk, and bring them back to health. And it's said that historians say that Christians saved much of Rome as a result of that. They showed the human side of Christianity. The first century church is recorded by historians that often a child, if it was born with a deformity or it was the wrong gender, that the family who was not Christian, who were pagan, would leave the child on the doorstep outside the home or somewhere further away from home and let it die of the elements. Christians would scoop these children up, take them home, nurse them, and bring them health. The apostolic church, let me ask you, the church of the apostles, what did they do? How did they help each other and help the community? Anyone? What did they do? Who did they help? The widows, the orphans, those who were struggling, they helped themselves. They shared their income. They shared their wealth. They supported each other. It changed the character of the church. And when I read in the lesson just we did recently, the church at Sinai, that God is trying to re-engineer, help them see the world differently. They were surrounded by warring nations. They were surrounded by slavery, awful slavery practices. They were surrounded by class and ethnic divisions of all kinds of discrimination. And yet the instruction to the church in Sinai was, love your neighbor. That's impressive. That's fascinating. That is absolutely inspiring. I pray that as we go forward, that we learn to grow, that we learn to develop the gifts that we already have, that we focus on our gifts, use them. Use them, whether it's literature evangelism, whether it's connecting with people in the streets, whether it's connecting with our young people, whether it's getting on a podcast or a video cast or working with Pastor Vadim in the community with evangelism. Use these gifts, but acknowledge that we have weaknesses, that we have challenges, and work on those challenges, chisel them, work them, understand that we need to make changes. Just like I did with my Asperger's, I realized that I needed to make changes so I can be more socially aware. And I think we as a church have incredible gifts, but we also have some challenges. And that is my prayer for our wonderful, gifted, and challenged church family. That is my prayer for you guys. Thank you.